Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you so much for coming out today. It's a little bit cooler today, which is nice. So thank you all. Can I get a show of hands really quick of people who were here for the first class? We're just trying to get an idea of who was already here and who's new. So we have a few new people. Thank you for coming. So today's class is going to be great. We're going to cover a whole bunch of things regarding what diet is the best. Please excuse my baby trying to grab the microphone. Didn't account for this happening. But we have here with us Terry and Becky Dorner, and they are health coaches, and they have a wealth of information to share. So I'm going to turn it right over to Becky, and you guys be sure to stay tuned. I also wanted to mention that we are live streaming on this camera right here, so you won't be directly on the camera, but if you have any questions, just hold those to the end, and just be aware if you ask any questions, they will be on our Facebook live stream. So just so you know. And here we go. Thanks, Becky, and thanks, Terry.
Very good. Welcome, everybody. I recognize a few of you. Thank you for coming today. But the first thing I want to do is thank Kathy and Robbie for their heart and their mission of wellness in this community. We just love the pharmacy. We love what they're doing. They're providing clean, wonderful, organic food for all of us. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that Terry and I are going to be around after the talk. If you have any questions, we'd love to either meet you, shake your hand, or help you with any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Becky. Sarah, for my wife. She's really key to this duo here. I'll tell you that. So let's see here. Let me get my technology set up. All right. Okay, so for those of you that were here last week, I'm going to share my story again, just for the newcomers and stuff. So some of this is a little familiar up front, but then we'll get into the topic. But like she said, we're Terry and Becky Dorner, and we operate Paradigm Wellness Consulting LLC, which is a Wisconsin-based online health coaching business. And we're going to show you how to fix yourself without doctors or drugs. And we're going to do the deep dive into diet, which is one of the 5 steps that we talked about last week. But you really can fix yourself like I did. I had a 13-year chronic illness, just really using common sense. And so I just want to say to you guys that if you've got health issues, there's a good chance it isn't your fault, because there is so much deception and confusion and misleading material out there that it's easy to get stuck. And that's where I was for that 13-year battle. I was stuck and chasing the latest shiny object and that kind of thing. And it can be really frustrating. But what I've since learned is that good health is possible. So, you know, take heart. And I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible to understand. But unfortunately, the medical community wants us to think that wellness is complicated and that drugs and doctors and procedures are what is what it takes. And I'm just here to say that for many, many of us, that simply is not true. It's just not true. Now, I'll unpack that a little bit later, but there is a better way for you to kind of regain your health and live the life that you want to live. And that's what we're going to show you today. So here's our goal for today. We want to educate you on the pros and cons of what's called the SAD diet, the Standard American Diet, the USDA Dietary Guidelines, vegan, vegetarian, and this group of eating plans called Paleo, Primal, Whole30, as well as the Ketogenic Diet, which is getting a lot of attention. Also, we're going to touch a little bit on macronutrients, because we have to have a basic understanding of that in order to choose the kind of plan we're going to do. Then we're going to tell you how to source clean food. And so, if you guys can put any of this into action, it can be helpful to you, even if you just want to like lose some weight, or if you're feeling your age and you've got fatigue and aches and pains and things like that. Some of that stuff can improve. Or if you want to get off of medication with your doctor's supervision, of course, because that's believed. Or if you want to get over a severe chronic illness like what I had. And that's because our basic core philosophy is that food is medicine. So you're with me so far on that? All right. Now I got to talk to you about our manifesto, because I want to be really clear about where Becky and I stand as far as our philosophy, so that there's just no mistake about that. We're part of a movement that believes that the human body can heal itself if we just set it up to do that. And we're different because we believe that lab-created synthetic drugs and genetically modified food and the over 100,000 chemicals that are in our environment are health robbers. They steal our health. But that God's way of healing is the answer. Clean food, whole food like what came out of the ground, and no chemicals. Now, we reject the conventional wisdom that health comes in a prescription bottle. You and I were not designed with an Advil or a Tylenol or a prescription drug deficiency. We were designed to operate drug-free. Now, we're fighting against, who are we fighting against? We are fighting against big food, big pharma, the chemical industry, the food industry and all that, who make it really, really challenging to live a healthy life. And I was just looking at some stats. Over 50% of Americans are suffering from at least one chronic illness. At least one. And that includes stuff like diabetes, autoimmune disease, obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, and digestive issues and stuff like that. So the question is, if the system were serving us so well, don't you think that that number would be, first of all, not that high, second of all, on the decline, but rather that number is on the rise. And it's getting worse. And in fact, the next generation is the first generation predicted to have a shorter lifespan than our generation. So we're just going the wrong direction as a nation. However, every day people are reversing these lifestyle illnesses on their own, using food and environmental choices and lifestyle changes as medicine. So this is who Becky and I are. We are educators that teach people a common sense, do-it-yourself approach to wellness. So that's our shtick. Now, a real quick note on what a health coach is. That's what Becky and I do. We educate and we coach our clients on how to adopt new habits and change their lifestyle so that they can fix their situation. We meet online weekly with them, and that really is the key to success. I met weekly with a coach, and it's just the answer. You can make a lot of fast tweaks and adjustments to the plan. Also, health coaching fills a gap that the medical system doesn't usually fill. When was the last time your doctor may have given you nutritional advice, much less offered to kind of walk alongside of you? Also, I'll tell you that in our case, there was an unbelievable return on investment. I was spending, I'll tell you a little later, crazy money. And we don't spend it on medical expenses. We don't spend anything now on drug co-pays or doctors or any of that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what a health coach is. This is what it is not. We don't diagnose or treat or cure anything. We're not licensed medical professionals, so and this is not medical advice. So having said that, some of you might be thinking, well then Terry, why should I listen to you? And the answer is because I got well doing some of the concepts that I just explained from a 13-year chronic illness after the conventional medical system and a lot of alternative stuff failed me. So we now have a passion to help other people just do it kind of faster and cheaper and with less pain than what we did. So for me, that means getting back to checking some stuff off my bucket list, like riding this unicycle. Maybe you've got more ambitious bucket list items. That was me. Now, I want to give you some backstory on how I got sick and then how Becky and I became health coaches. Because when I look back at my life, I don't think that my immune system stood a chance. And that's because of the destructive effects of excess carbohydrates and sugar. And, which is the root cause of all these diseases we're talking about, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and all that. Well, this, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a 3-generation bakery business called Heinemann Bakeries, which was a Dorner family business. And this is my grandfather and my dad and my uncle and my older brother who all ran the business. And guess what this business was based on? Excess carbohydrates and sugar. So, it grew, and that's what I was around. I worked there summers and holidays, and I got to tell you, it was the most awesome job ever. I was literally a kid in a candy store. Everything we made was available to me every day in unlimited supply at no charge. So it was kind of a perk of being the boss's kid or whatever. But, oh, by the way, this is my grandfather. 1904, this photo was taken. If you were here last week, don't answer this question. But in 1904, Americans consumed 5 pounds of sugar, What do you think that number was annually? What do you think that number was in 2014? Any guesses? 15? 100? 152 pounds. 152 pounds. So, it's crazy. Anyway, as you might imagine, I became a thriving little sugar addict, right from the start. And because I didn't know then what I know now, it's just when you eat sugar, it suppresses your immune system, and it stays that way for hours. It spikes insulin, it feeds cancer, it feeds pathogens. It's just it's really bad stuff. Sugar. It tastes great, but it's bad for you. And so I pretty much was thinking back. I probably never went more than 3, 4, 5 hours without sugar my whole entire life, until maybe a few years ago when I learned about this and started to get better. So all that lifestyle laid the foundation for getting sick. And what I had was a 13-year run with chronic Lyme disease. Now, Lyme disease is a really debilitating bacterial and viral and parasitic disease that also triggers additional autoimmune diseases. People with Lyme disease say that it has 300 different symptoms, and it mimics everything, and it looks like everything, and it's horribly misdiagnosed and epidemic in proportion. And as a result, it took me over 2 years and 21 doctors and thousands of dollars just to get a diagnosis. And then after I got the diagnosis, Becky and I spent another $140,000 over the next 12, 13 years chasing a solution. And the end result was that I was hooked on, wow, I have an emotional moment again. I ended up hooked on antibiotics and antiviral medication. And, so I just count that as a fail. So life pretty much disappeared. When you're a sick person, there's a lot of emotional, relational, financial stuff going on. But, on the emotional side, sick people like I was, you're racked with guilt and shame because you can't meet your obligations to your employer or to your family or to your kids. And for me, physically, I was, God, I always get choked up when I talk about this. I was chronically fatigued. I battled depression, anxiety, and pain on the physical side. And I think, from a family standpoint, my kids, they were sometimes confused and frustrated and angry because they didn't really know what to make of it. And I think in hindsight, they were sort of grieving the loss of the father that they once knew. I mean, I was around, but I wasn't around. I wasn't engaged. I was super involved with them and stuff. So the relationship side of it was just brutal. Chronic disease is just a family killer. It destroys families. But anyway, the only bright spot was Becky. She was caring for me. She was raising our kids, and she literally, she had the patience of Job. And I was saying to her, Becky, the other night, I'm like, man, that was just superhuman what you did. And she said, no, I was hanging on by a fingernail to God, for a lot of those years. And it was really her faith that got her through. And thank God for that, because it's a tough road if you're chronically ill. So anyway, in retrospect, I realized that I spent all this money on a failed treatment strategy, and that's what I was looking for, the one thing, the one magic bullet. But we've since learned that getting your health back is at least a 5-pronged strategy. And all these things have to, and maybe 15, 20, or 100 different little tactics along the way, integrative. And that is what ultimately gave me my health back. And we talked about that sequence, and I'll touch on it a little bit later. But the other thing that happened was that Becky had neglected her health because of the strain she was under. Now, she wasn't in crisis the way I was, but she kind of let her health go because, she's caring for me, raising the kids, and doing all this stuff. So she developed something called Hashimotos thyroiditis, which is, some people call it Hashis. It's a thyroid autoimmune disorder. She was pre- and post-menopausal during this whole time. So her hormones were all over the map, and her mood was all over the map. She was pre-diabetic. She'd gained 25 pounds. So she was fatigued and brain foggy, and she was also on 3 prescription medications. Well, she jumped on the same program that I was on, that Dr. Daniels taught us, and all of that stuff cleared up, essentially doing the same thing. So a natural approach to getting your wellness back has almost universal applications, whether you have Lyme disease or you got Hashimotos or you need to lose weight. And that's the thing. And so here's the payoff. So we've got now our health back and the energy and the clarity to enjoy our family. And so when I look back on it, it was super hard and it was stressful, but really by God's grace, we were provided for. Our relationships were like, they're strengthened now, but man, they were super strained at times. It's tough. I have to tell you that one of my kids is in the audience. This is making this more emotional for me than I had anticipated. But the most profound transformation was that Becky and I were then given a new vision for our future, and that was to inspire and challenge people to move one step closer to the truth about health and wellness. We really felt strongly that we wanted to redeem that 13 years of misery and make it our mission to help folks get there faster, cheaper, and with less pain than we did. So that was a vision, and I have to tell you, I was in the corporate world for a long time, and it was kind of running out of gas for me. And this is such a gift from God to have a new way forward, a new vision, and a real purpose that we think really makes a difference in the world. So with this vision, Becky and I flew to Panama and trained under Dr. Jennifer Daniels, who is the one that brought us both to health, and learned everything about this sequence that she brought us through. And then we came back, and Becky got the Primal Health Coach certification as well, which was developed by this guy in the middle, Mark Sisson, who's like a major leader in the health and longevity, in the health and longevity space. So that's our story, and I hope you find it a little bit inspiring, because really, if we can do this, then anybody can do it. So are you with me so far? Yeah. We got it? All right. So that is our kind of our philosophy and our story. So now we'll get into what we're here to talk about. Except that we have to review last week. The 5 causes of illness and disease that we talked about: dehydration, constipation, malnutrition, toxins, and parasites. Today we're going to deep dive into, into step 3, which is just the food. But I got to make a couple comments and disclaimers about this. We call it the diet wars, right? Now, the way we choose to eat is super personal. And many of us have really strong feelings, and it can be a really divisive topic, almost on par with political or religious or scientific debate. And so I want to be clear about where Becky and I are coming from on this, lest anybody take exception with anything I'm about to say. We've done our best to research and evaluate and test these eating plans ourselves. So what I'm going to give you is our opinion of what works best and why, but recognizing that everybody responds to stuff differently, and we certainly do not have the corner on the market of truth. So that's one thing. Now, I do want to comment a little bit on nutrition science research, because it is absolutely it's a food fight. It's a massive food fight. We've sat in conferences and watched these researchers from all sides deconstruct these studies and jockey and lobby for position. And I think, my personal opinion is that the researchers, the food and chemical industries, the governments, and these nonprofit health advocacy groups are all jockeying for influence, for power, for money, and every once in a while, the truth. But in my personal opinion, the bigger the budgets, the more there is to protect in the way of business and industry, and the truth has a really, really tough time coming out, or we get little nuggets of it. So, and then there's one other thing. Whenever people say to me, when they quote the science says this diet's better than that, what I've come to believe is that it's not, finding the science is really, really difficult. Usually it's their science or their science or their science, and then the science. And so it's not a conversation stopper as far as I'm concerned. It's like, okay, who did the study? What's the methodology? And all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of holes in a lot of these major studies that some of the major dietary plans have on them. And it's all over the map. But there was this guy, Dr. Ansel Keys, who was the kind of father of the low-fat research. And there are major issues with that study, for example. There's some significant issues with something called the China study, which the vegan community points to. But there are also issues with the paleo and the ketogenic. I mean, the science flies all back and forth. So you just, you do the best you can. But that said, with that big fat disclaimer, there is one thing that pretty much all the popular eating plans agree on. And that's that veggies have to be fresh, whole veggies out of the ground, have to be the foundation, that excess refined carbohydrates are bad, and that sugar is bad. So if all you did was walk away right now and not listen to anything else I had to say and just ate veggies and got the carbs out of, and the sugar out of your life, refined carbs, you'd be so far ahead of like 90% of the population. So those are foundational to most of the plans we're going to talk about. All right, so that said, I want to look a little bit at some history here. In 1980, the government rolled out the first ever dietary guidelines. That's the food pyramid that we're familiar with. 20 years prior, obesity was flat in this country. But for the 30 years after that, obesity rose 25 percentage points to the point now where 75% of the US population, 75%, is either classified as overweight or obese. Now, this is why food policy matters so much in this country, because if the government gets it wrong, the consequences are devastating. Our government spends $1.4 trillion with a T dollars, which is 8% of GDP, on obesity and diabetes-related conditions. So it's just it's a freight train that's going in the wrong direction. Because when the government makes food policy, here's how it gets rolled out: food assistance programs, schools, and the military. But the most alarming for us is that professional medical associations like the American Medical Association, American Academy of Dietetics, the American Diabetes Association, the American Pediatric Association, all adopt these guidelines, and they roll out through the hospitals and the healthcare system and become part of our care. Now, I asked this question the last time. This process is what gives us hospital food when we're sick in the hospital. Does anybody really believe that hospital food is health-giving? It's not. And this is an example of how the government pays for, what they pay for in a food assistance program. I'm not going to get all the details, but the bottom line is on this big chart, all it is heavily processed, sugar-laden foods, carbohydrate-heavy, dead food. There's not one piece of whole food on this whole slide. And this is the kind of stuff that is being paid for by our government for people that need food assistance. So, the health thing is, this is a big part of the reason why the health is declining in this country. All right, enough about how wonderful a government is, their advice is on eating. Let's move on. All right, before we can talk about a diet, we got to talk about macronutrients. Now, macronutrients are the three kinds of fuel that our body uses to operate: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. So fat is things like butter, carbohydrates are things like potatoes, and protein is things like meat. Now, generally speaking, you need the right ratio of these three macronutrients in order for your body to work well. And that's where a lot of the debate comes in on these different eating plans. But to refer to something we just said, excess carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates is the runaway freight train in this country, because that's what's at the root of all this disease. Carbs convert to sugar. Sugar spikes this hormone called insulin, which is the fat storage hormone, and that leads to all of these lifestyle diseases, which are on this thing that I've been talking about: prediabetes, diabetes, high cholesterol, heart disease, even Alzheimer's. So to a large degree, getting these diseases is a choice. Now, there is some genetic predisposition and things like that, but in the alternative world, they have this saying that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And there's a field of epigenetic research that talks about how only 10 to 30% of our genes are locked, which means that 70 to 90% of them can be influenced by our lifestyle, our diet, our stress, and so forth. So that's great news, because now we have control. And we don't just have to say, well, my dad had heart disease and my mom had diabetes, so I guess I'm, that's the train I'm on. So that is that's the story on these lifestyle diseases. We can take our power back. Now, because carbs is this runaway freight train, I just want to give you a little bit of a framework. This is something called a carbohydrate curve. But for metabolically healthy people, you want to maintain your carbohydrate intake between 100 and 150 grams. And I'll show you kind of what this looks like on the next slide. And this is what we would maybe call, the people with this type of eating would call moderate. But that seems super low because the average American is eating 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates a day. So what the healthier community says is moderate, the average American is saying, my gosh, that's crazy low. It's half. But anyway, 100 to 150 to maintain your weight and to maintain your wellness. The next level would be is if you were to eat between 50 and 100 grams of carbohydrates. That's what we would call low. And then the lowest level is below 50 grams, and that is a state called ketosis, which that word comes from the ketogenic diet, which is getting so much attention these days. So yeah, 150, 100, and under 50. So this is the target range, and these are the benchmarks that Becky and I use in our own life and when we're coaching our clients. So this is what carbohydrates look like. So each plate here is 20 grams. And so this whole slide, if you ate the whole slide, or you ate everything on the whole slide, it's 160 grams. So a lot of people think that a lower carbohydrate diet is kind of depriving, but this is not, in my opinion, it's not really that that depriving or that rough. But there is a nuance with this slide. So the bagel and the pasta and the rice on the left, those are refined carbohydrates. So they're going to spike your insulin, and that's not optimal because it stores fat, it varies your mood and things like that. But the 4 plates on the right, they're whole food, they're better choices because they're not processed. So they trigger insulin release in a more slow, steady manner, so your mood stays more stable, and you don't get that that spike. So that is that's the story on macros and carbs. Basically, carbs is the one to be concerned about. So now we'll get into these eating plans. And we're going to start with the standard American diet. Now, the standard American diet, interestingly, it's not even a thing. Nobody invented it. It's just the way, it's just a reflection of how Americans eat. And we eat pretty badly. So it is a diet that's high in processed meat, carbohydrates, sugars, refined grains, fried foods, and sugary drinks. And if there are any pros to it, it's convenient. You can get this stuff at every gas station on the planet and wherever else. And some people, if there was, I was struggling to come up with other cons, but some people say it tastes good, and some of it does. But the critics say that processed food, for one thing, is addictive. These foods are engineered to create cravings. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but it's a mind-blowing topic. But also, the critics say it's high in sugar, chemicals, preservatives, colors, inflammatory oils, GMOs, toxins. It's low in nutritional value, it's disease-causing, and it's way beyond that 150 carbohydrate gram limit. So basically, you can file the standard American diet in the round basket, throw it away. It's just a health robber. So it's not even repairable. You got a little plate of salad at the top. That's about it. Everything else is like chemically processed and man-made. Now I look at the vegan diet. It's pretty popular. This is a 100% plant-based diet. Fruits, veggies, grains, legumes, which are beans, nuts, seeds. And this diet gets their protein mostly from things like tofu, tempeh, seitan. Seitan? Is that how you say it? Nuts, seeds, and legumes. So the advantages of the vegan diet, a lot of people say, it's great for weight loss and cleansing. It's really rich in micronutrients, which are you have your macros and your micros. The macros are your vitamins and your minerals. And it's free of toxins that you get in conventionally produced protein, animal meats. Cows, chickens, and farmed fish and things like that. So it's a really good cleansing diet among other things. But the critics of this diet, they say that there is one, well, there's a couple of critiques on it. This diet does not offer any vitamin B12 because B12 is only found in the animal kingdom. So the critics will say, well, we think you should get all your nutrients from food. And the vegans say, well, we can just supplement with a synthetic form of B12 and we're good to go. So, you can decide a lot of times with this diet, you'd want to kind of try before you buy and see how you feel. The other critique that's made about the vegan diet is that there's no collagen in this diet. Collagen is only found in the animal kingdom, so there can be issues with things like cartilage, tendons, discs, hair, skin, and nails. So now in the vegan community, there is a position that says that you can get the precursors to collagen in the plant world. These are things like lysine or proline. Although I just talked to a guy with a big vegan shirt on, and he told me that recently some vegan collagen has come out. I haven't really looked into it, but that's a little bit of a hole. But those precursors are not the same as actual animal collagen. So we know folks who are on the vegan diet who complain of joint pain, but we also know athletes on the vegan diet who do great. So really, it's something you got to test for yourself. Another thing that the critics would say about the vegan diet is that there's more reliance on processed foods. We try to have most of our foods, being unprocessed, but a reliance on things like cheese and tofu. Also, it's heavily reliant upon grains, which can be genetically modified and can create some inflammation. And also, if you're gluten sensitive, a vegan diet with a lot of grains in it can be problematic. So that is and then this diet is always more than 150 grams a day. Although there is a debate as to whether or not unrefined carbohydrates are okay versus refined carbohydrates. So it gets a little bit. There's a lot of subtleties in it. But this is a diet worth trying. A lot of people do it, and they do it successfully. I forgot to click my clicker. The next diet that we'll cover is the vegetarian diet. Now, the main difference between this and the vegan diet is just the addition of dairy and eggs, but it still has no meat. So plant-based, fruits, veggies, legumes, nuts, seeds, eggs, dairy. Now, it has all of the same pros as the vegan diet, plus it has the inclusion of the B12 from the eggs and dairy. So that's a plus, some would say, for this for the vegetarian diet. Now, on the critic side, it has all of the same cons as the vegan plan, except that B12 is now included. So I want to make a comment about dairy, because dairy is included in here. Becky and I are a little bit suspect of dairy because it can be inflammatory for a lot of people. It can be inflammatory to the digestive system. So for us, we either avoid it or we eat it very sparingly, maybe as a condiment and that type of a thing. But when we start working with clients, one of the first things we'll do is we'll do sort of an elimination diet, and dairy goes and grains go, and we see how the body does, and then we add those things back in. Some people tolerate it, some people don't. But my personal opinion is that dairy is not a free pass. So anyway, that's vegetarian. Now, the next category is called paleo, primal, or whole 30. These are 3 different types of diets, but they all are very similar. So their thing is that they emphasize lots of veggies. You see veggies at the bottom of the pyramid here, whereas on the previous one you had more grains and things like that. But it consists of veggies, well-sourced animal protein. The sourcing of the protein is like they're pretty meticulous about that in these plans. Healthy fats, nuts, seeds, and a limited amount of fruit. This diet does not go crazy with the fruit, with big fruit smoothies and stuff like that, because that will spike your insulin. A lot of folks say that, experts say that sugar is sugar, whether it's refined or whether it's natural sugar out of an apple or a peach or something like that. It spikes insulin. So we need to be aware of that as we're formulating this. So that's why the fruit is limited. And it's different from the vegetarian diet, this way of eating, because it allows no grains, no legumes or beans, no dairy, and no sugar. So this is a pretty big departure from the way most people eat. And then there's just one small nuance, which is that this primal plan allows dairy, but the other 2 don't. But here's some of the pros, though, because it gets really confusing. It's great. This way of eating is great for weight loss and for brain health and for stabilizing mood. And one of the reasons is because it's very satiating and it controls cravings. And that's because of the higher fat content that is in this diet versus other ways of eating. And because it is a lower carb diet, it improves blood numbers, blood sugar, triglycerides, cholesterol, because it's low carb. Like some of the other plants, it's really rich in micronutrients. It does include B12. It does include collagen for your joints and nails. Does not allow sugar or inflammatory vegetable oils, and it's free of toxins for a different reason than the vegetarian plan, and that is that the sourcing of the protein is meticulous. Wild-caught fish, grass-fed beef, and things like that. And this plant is always under 150 grams of carbohydrates a day. Now, there's plenty of criticism for this diet. Critics say that the variety of food choices is limited, that there are no grains or legumes, that it's too high in fat, and that it's too restrictive in carbohydrates. So yeah, this is really an interesting thing. Full disclosure, Becky and I, we actually do a little bit of all these plans, but what's interesting about this way of eating is it creates something called metabolic flexibility, which is the body's ability to switch back and forth from burning sugar as fuel to burning fat as fuel on demand. So it's sort of like a hybrid car where it's going to run on gas or electric based on the demands of the driver. Well, this diet allows you to become fat adapted, is what they call it, to where you can access the fat stores in your body. Higher carbohydrate and some of the previous plans don't offer that because you haven't developed the metabolic flexibility to access the fat stores. They keep you burning sugar all the time, and sugar is in shorter supply in our body, and not as clean burning. So, for example, we store about 2,400 calories of what's called glycogen, which is sugar, in our muscles, and that's our fuel. But we store about 80,000 calories of fat on our body. But if we can't get to the fat, then it's not doing us any good. This is why we see a lot of folks in the gym really like working out hard and everything, but they're overweight because their body can't access those fat stores. They're exercising, burning calories like crazy, but the fat's not coming off. It's because their body is not metabolically able to access those stores because insulin levels get kept high because there's too many carbohydrates in the diet. So I think that's a pretty fascinating thing. So you see, you used to hear athletes, and some still do this, so you hear about carbo loading, you're going to run a marathon and you're going to carbo load. Well, there are athletes now that don't get hung up on the carbohydrate loading because they have the metabolic flexibility to tap into fat stores and things like that. So it's an interesting thing. Now, the ketogenic diet, this diet's getting so much hype and so much attention. It is mostly fat, like 60% of your calories or more come from fat. This usually freaks a lot of people out, but I'll get to that in a minute. Mostly fat, moderate protein, very low carbohydrate. So it's healthy fats, nuts, seeds, dairy, animal protein, veggies, and very minimal fruit. Now, the main difference between ketogenic and the plan I just talked about before, the Paleo Primal Whole 30, is that fats are increased a lot and that carbohydrates are decreased a lot. And also in this plan, there's no legumes either. So the pros are a lot of the same of the previous plan, but there's an additional advantage that researchers are finding that the ketogenic diet is really good for reversing disease, these lifestyle diseases we've been talking about. Now the critics, in terms of the cons, say that it has all the same drawbacks as the previous plan, but some people talk about that it has this thing called the keto flu. And that is, what that is that's flu-like symptoms for a few days while your body adapts to this new way of eating and kind of converts over from being a sugar burner to being, fat adapted and burning fat and stuff like that. Now, Becky and I, we agree. There's the leader in this field. His name is Eric Westman. We saw him at a conference. He's treated over 65,000 patients with this diet and says that if it were a drug, it'd be approved by the FDA because of the study and the research that's been done on it for reversing diseases, these lifestyle diseases. Now, when I quote science, you have to remember what I said earlier, but I happen to think Westman's a credible guy, and his research methodology I like and I agree with. But one of the big questions about the ketogenic diet is whether or not it's sustainable. So there's some people that think that you should, this is not settled. Some people say you should stay in it long term. Other people, and this is where Becky and I fall, say you should cycle in and out of it. So your body goes into this state of ketosis where it's burning these things called ketone bodies as fuel, which puts you in a therapeutic state. So we're kind of in the camp that you cycle in and out of this. You might begin it for a week or a month or a couple months, and then you would cycle out of it and come out of that state. But the jury's still out on that. But it's getting a lot of excitement, this ketogenic diet. Now, I have to make a note on fat, because fat has been demonized by the mainstream as being bad. We're throwing fat's bad, it's really bad. And because this diet, these last two diets are very high in fat, we have to address it. But here's the nuance. All fats aren't bad. There are healthy fats and there are unhealthy fats. So the bad fats on the right, these are things like regular commercial vegetable oil, corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil. They are heavily processed. They contain a really high ratio of inflammatory omega-6 fats. Omega-6s are bad, omega-3s are good. And so there are a lot of experts that think that these inflammatory vegetable oils are at the root of systemic inflammation and arterial scarring, which is at the root of this whole cholesterol debate. They think that the root cause of high cholesterol is, or of cholesterol buildup, plaque buildup, is this scarring. So actually, these inflammatory oils scar your arteries. Cholesterol comes to the rescue to patch it up, patch it up. It's trying to help you, patch it up, patch it up. And so a lot of the medical community will say, we have high cholesterol and you have this plaque buildup. Well, that's as far as they go, and they prescribe a statin. But what you could do is get these bad oils out of your life, cut the inflammation, and the plaque won't build up. And so there's that. And by the way, there's studies that show that there isn't really a good correlation between high cholesterol and heart disease anyway. Heart disease is more driven by this inflammation stuff. Experts say, I'm not a doctor, but that's what I believe. Now, one last comment. These bad vegetable oils are everywhere. They're in restaurants and they're in all processed food. And so if you did one thing to improve your life, it would be get these oils out of your life. But they're tough to avoid. You have to eat at home a lot. But they are really at the root of a lot of disease. Now there's good fats. And these are high in the omega-3s. They're minimally processed. And they're more compatible with what our body needs. This is things like coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, and that kind of stuff. And our body, according to a lot of these doctors, David Perlmutter being one, needs these good fats to operate. So for example, our brain is mostly fat, and it needs these healthy fats in order to operate. You guys maybe have heard of like bulletproof coffee and putting MCT oil or coconut oil in your coffee. Well, that's brain food. And so this whole kind of low fat track that we've been on is not great for brain health. But you got to get the right fats in. So anyway, that's the nuance on fats. Now there's some good resources if you want to Google. There's a guy named Dr. William Davis. He's a cardiologist, so that believes in the therapeutic value of things like this higher fat stuff. There's Mark Hyman, who's the functional medicine director at the Cleveland Clinic, and there's a guy named Dale Bredesen. He's a doctor who's a neuro researcher in the field of Alzheimer's. So there are a lot of MDs who have seen this side of the argument and are adopting it and are having great results, with their patients. So, so that's where we fit on that. So, what is, after that long diatribe, the best diet in the world for Becky and I? The best diet in the world for us is one that we, as a guiding tactic, like to keep our insulin below the 150 grams a day to hedge against these diseases of the refined carbs. And so, as a result, this is what we do and have done. We like the vegetarian or the vegan approach, but we make it low grain, and low or no grain, and low or no legumes, beans, for cleansing and for weight loss and for kind of a metabolic reset. And that's what Dr. Daniels did with us when we first got on board with her for our healing track. Then on a day-to-day basis, Becky and I do the Paleo Primal Whole30 approach because we like the 6 to 9 cups of veggies a day, well-sourced protein, and and healthy fats. Now, on this plan, I lost 40 pounds. Becky lost 25 pounds. You can lose weight on the other diets, but this was just our personal experience. And also removal of the reduction of the carbs was really key for Becky's prediabetes to clear up, and the elimination of the grains was really key for her Hashimotos thyroiditis to clear up. So it's what we believe anyway. So so that's how we do it. So now, what's best for you is you have to kind of try before you buy. Whatever works for you, you've got to test it and see how your body feels, because that really is the guiding light. I mean, there's a lot of great ways to eat around the world, and you get into these debates about what the best plan is, but we're all metabolically a little bit different. So, but to go back to what we agree on, veggies, low refined carbs, little or no sugar as the foundation. So that is that. And of course, check with your doctor before you make any changes, because we're not doctors. Now, regardless of the plan that you choose, there's 3 things that you got to evaluate. And we'll go moving on. And that is sourcing, and sourcing. It's kind of like real estate. Location, location, location. We have to know where our food comes from. And there are 2 huge challenges that make this really hard. First, it's the chemical saturation of the crops, which go into our body when we eat the food. This is like a major problem. And second, there is a lot of deception and spin and manipulated science that's going on with food. So let's look at the chemical thing. Now, if you were here last week, some of these will look familiar to you, but most processed food companies, of which there's only a dozen, are linked to the 6 largest chemical companies in the world who are doing this to our crops. Spraying them. These are hazmat suits these guys are wearing, and they're using this chemical among others, but this is the leader, called Roundup, also known as glyphosate. Now, tons and tons of glyphosate are being used to saturate 95% of the corn, wheat, soy, and cotton crops in this country. And it's interesting to note that this chemical is illegal in Europe. They do not allow it. But it's safe, right? Because that's what Monsanto, the manufacturer, tells us, but not so fast. Because when you take Roundup and you combine all the other chemicals used in conventional agriculture, you get in your food cancer-causing agents, hormone disruptors, neurotoxins, and all this bad stuff. So in this case, 56 different pesticide residues found in conventionally farmed grapes, 45 found in conventionally farmed strawberries, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Now, it's also getting into our breakfast cereals and the processed food supply at levels that are far beyond the safe limits set by the government. So it's bad stuff. Glyphosate's bad stuff. And if that's not bad enough, there's these things called GMOs, genetically modified organisms or genetically modified food. You're reading the slide right. Corn is patented as a pesticide with the US government. Now, how could that be? The short explanation, I gave a really long one last time, but the short explanation is that the food is genetically modified in a lab, changed, to create a built-in pesticide, so that when an insect goes to eat it, it dies. Its stomach explodes. So when we eat this food, that insecticide attacks our gut, creates a condition called leaky gut, creates digestive issues and all kinds of autoimmune disease. It is at the root of a ton of autoimmune issues. So that is, and here's the problem. The problem is that between 88 and 95% of the crops in this country are genetically modified. So less than 5% of the food grown and consumed and sold is organic. It's growing, thank God, it's growing. But here's what happens. Here are the beautiful things that happen if you just did one thing, another one thing, and get the GMOs out of your life. 85% of the people that just cut GMOs out improve their digestive problems. I mean, you're talking, leaky gut, Crohn's, colitis, all kinds of, and just bloating and stomach pain and things like that. 60% improve fatigue, 54% lose weight, 51% improve their brain fog, This is significant. 51% improve anxiety, depression, and mood problems, which is a real problem in this country, and 47% improve joint pain. So, you know, it's I can't go down all of them, but it's the good news is you can eliminate these things. All right, next topic. I'm going to ask you what seems like a random question, but does anybody know which is faster, a roadrunner or a coyote? Any guesses? It is, it's the coyote. The coyote is twice as fast as the roadrunner. It goes 43 miles an hour. Roadrunner tops out at 20. Yet, most of us believe that the roadrunner is faster. Why? Because we learned about it. We learned about it as a lie from a cartoon when we were kids, right? This is exactly what the food industry is doing to us. They are lying to us, only on steroids. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the, you know, we're still kind of in the like, food is really, processed food is really, really harmful stage of this talk. So this is what the deception looks like. So this is a gal named Vani Hari, also known as the Food Babe on Facebook. She is a nutrition kind of advocate, a food industry watchdog. And this book is great. It's called Feeding You Lies, How to Unravel the Food Industry's Playbook and Reclaim Your Health. And it'll blow your mind. Just want to give you a couple of quick examples of the type of deception the processed food manufacturers are using with us. Major food producers have two different recipes for a lot of their products. A less healthy recipe for those of us here in the US, and a more healthy recipe for those folks in Europe. Now, why do you suppose that is? It's because in Europe they have stricter laws for what they allow in their food. So here's an example of what that looks like. So you've got the same Quaker oatmeal product. The US version has 29 ingredients. The UK version has 5 ingredients, okay? So in the US it has things like red number 40, maltodextrin, pyridoxine, hydrochloride, mononitrate, and a bunch of other bad stuff. None of that stuff is in the European version. On Heinz ketchup, our version has high fructose corn syrup and corn syrup, which are very, very difficult for our bodies to metabolize. But the European version doesn't have that. So even their junk food is cleaner. It's kind of an oxymoron, right? But it's cleaner. So McDonald's fries, they have fewer of these really bad vegetable oils and fewer ingredients that you can't pronounce. Like, here's a rule. If you can't pronounce it, don't put it in your body. Like here's one called dimethylpolysilazane, which is in the US version of these Mickey D fries that aren't in the European version. Mountain Dew, our version has yellow number 5, something called EDTA, sodium benzoate, which is a petroleum product. Benzene, cigarette lighters, and you know, just a bunch of other bad stuff. So the bottom line is that these companies, these freaking companies, I get fired up. They know how to make healthy food. They know how to distribute it, and they know how to market it. They used to tell us, oh, we need preservatives for shelf life, and we're feeding the world, and you know, we got to be, stuff has to be able to be preserved. It's baloney. So why are they doing it? The first reason they're doing it is because they can. The US government has pretty slack rules on what they'll allow in our food, unlike the Europeans. Now, and the second reason is this thing called enhanced craveability. Now, that's a nice politically correct term for addiction. So I looked up the word, I didn't even know it's a word, craveability, I looked it up. The definition is having qualities that engender an intense desire for more. That sounds like addiction. But more addiction equals more sales, and nowhere is this phenomenon more demonstrated than in this masterpiece of processed food. It's a marvel of food science and food psychology, all wrapped up in the Doritos Roulette product. It has lab-created, natural and artificial flavors that increase craveability by like intensifying the taste response. Now, one of the reasons we eat more of this stuff is because it gives us all this taste, which are created in a lab, by the way. I mean, they don't exist in nature, but we don't get any nutrition. So we just keep eating. But the other amazing psychological phenomenon is that these food psychology researchers have figured out that if you don't know what you're going to get next out of the bag, you'll eat more. So Doritos Roulette has 3 different flavors of chips in that bag, so we just keep going and going and going. So it's a marvel in how they create food addiction. I mean craveability, right? That's what they say. So it's horrific. It's horrific. All right, we can finally get into the section where here's how we solve the problem. I'm going to give you the hierarchy of how to source your food and where to go to get clean food. The first thing you want to do is grow your own food. Now, the reason you want to grow your own food is because then you know the chain of custody of the food. It is so important to know where your food is coming from. If you don't know where it's coming from, you don't know what it's in, you don't know what's on it, and this kind of thing. Now, we don't grow our own food. It's not practical for us. But so the next best thing is get to know your local farmer or farm store or specialty grocer like the pharmacy here. And develop a relationship and figure out if you can trust them or not. But what you're looking for is basically chemical-free food from these folks. And locally grown food is more biocompatible with us because it's being raised in the same climate and has the same stressors as our bodies. So produce that is grown here is better for us, healthier for us than the same produce grown across the country. So there's a real reason beyond local economic impact to eat locally. So, and that's what Becky and I do a lot of. Now, the next thing is to contact something called the local CSA, or Community Supported Agricultural Group. These are groups you can Google who will round up basically locally grown stuff and deliver it to you or deliver it to a central pickup point, and you can, you can source it that way. Now, the fourth option would be to go to the farmer's market, but I have to just caution you that you have to seek out the organic vendors only. Farmers markets, a lot of them are supplied with conventional produce, delivered by the same truck that delivers, to Publix or whatever. And so you can't just assume that if you go to the farmers market, you're going to get pesticide-free or chemical-free produce. And then finally, all else fails, go to the grocery store to the organic section, Whole Foods, Sprouts, or even Publix. Now, we source some food from from the grocery store as well, but the problem with that is that you don't know a lot of times where that food came from. So you might have an organic organic produce, but it wasn't locally grown. So that's kind of the hierarchy of how to go about it. So now we're gonna cut through and look at a couple specific categories and try and help you understand labeling a little bit. Now, for produce, the only 2 labels you need to worry about is organic or chemical free. Now, a lot of local farmers, it's cost prohibitive to get that USDA certification. But if you know them or you trust them and they're using certified organic techniques and you trust them, then that's good enough. That's good enough for us. And then the other watchword with produce, it's pretty straightforward. It's just to avoid conventionally grown produce that has chemicals and stuff. Usually, if stuff isn't labeled organic, then it's conventional, but not always. Now, as far as sourcing produce for those of us that are on a budget, which is probably just about everybody, there's 2 different categories. You can Google the Clean 15 or the Dirty Dozen, but there are 15 conventional produce categories that are safe to buy non-organic. And a lot of times these are the thicker skin, things like bananas and avocados and stuff. But then there's also this thing called the Dirty Dozen. This is an independent group that analyzes this stuff. And these are the produce that you always, always, always want to buy organic. Strawberries, for example, if they're not organic, are one of the most chemical-laden, foods that are out there. So, so that's just a little budget hack. Eggs is a super confusing category. I'm not going to give you everything, but there are 5 different levels. Here's the label to look for: organic or pasture-raised. Organic or pasture-raised. Does that have to be one or both? Both? Organic and pasture-raised. So you want to avoid words like cage-free, natural, humane-raised, grass-finished, hormone, and antibiotic-free. These labels are they're not worth listening to. They could be that, but they couldn't be organic. So, for example, so there's a lot of these kind of marketing terms that try to lead us astray. The word natural doesn't mean anything.
I would just add in if it's a local egg and you know the provider.
Yeah. Okay.
Then-
Yeah. If you get your eggs locally, then you know the. Yeah, you know the provider, but a local provider will be, probably feeding him organic feed and letting him. Yeah. So then here's the other theme too. Most organically grown food has a healthier nutrition profile than conventionally grown food. And so even though it looks the same to us, to the naked eye, our body can tell the difference, at the cellular level. And so it's worth investing in clean food. So eggs, pasture-raised eggs, for example, have more omega-3s and vitamin A and E than a conventional egg. So, a lot of people think, organic's too expensive and they can't tell the difference. But again, our biology, our body can tell the difference. Now, sourcing meat, the one thing to look for is 100% grass-fed. So for your beef, 100% grass-fed. You want to avoid things like, again, natural, humane-raised, grass-finished. Grass-finished is a little, it's a little controversial, but it's where they feed the cow grain, and then at the last portion of their life, they feed them grass, and so they can call it grass-finished, but it's still a grain-fed cow. The problem with grain-fed meat is that it has a high ratio of those inflammatory omega-6s that we talked about earlier, and very low on the omega-3s. That's a grain-fed cow. A grass-fed cow, it has the opposite ratio, higher non-inflammatory omega-3s. And this is because cows are designed to eat grass. They're not designed to eat grain. So we need to stick with the way God made it. Also, grass-fed beef doesn't have any hormones or antibiotics. Poultry, same thing as eggs. Pasture-raised, 100% organic. Stay away from those other deceptive labels, natural, humane raised, and so forth. So that's the poultry deal. Fish is an interesting concept. Really, the word you want to look for is wild caught. Wild caught. You don't want farm-raised fish, although farm-raised fish isn't usually promoted. It's usually just fish. So the kind of fish you would want to eat would be wild-caught salmon or fish that are smaller at the bottom of the food chain, like sardines or anchovies. Smaller a fish is, the less toxins and mercury and stuff it takes in, and so smaller fish are better than bigger fish, and wild-caught are always better than farmed fish. You want to stay away from fish that are at the top of the food chain, like swordfish or shark and things like that. And Asian fish, if it's coming from Asia, you want to avoid it altogether. The waters are really, really polluted. Regulations are super low, and it's something you want to stay away from. Now, the nutritional value of fish is different too. With these fish farms, they feed them grains. Fish are not designed to eat grains, so you get a less nutritional profile. Also, for the farm-raised salmon, they put some kind of synthetic pigment in their food so that they get that pink look. It's fake. It's fake pink. So it's bad news. So anyway, this is a lot of detail and confusing terms. So I decided to author a book that even I could understand. It's the world's shortest book. It's 1 page. It's 6 bullet points, and it is called "Sourcing for Dummies." Soon to be released. This is, when all else fails, this is the questions to ask. Does it look like how God made it? If the answer is yes, you're good to go. Does it have anything in it or on it that's man-made? If the answer is yes, you probably want to put it back. Does it come in a box, a jar, or a can? Now, in a perfect world, you would want to buy no packaged food, just buy produce out of the ground. But the additional question you have to ask, if it's packaged, is, are there any ingredients in there that I cannot pronounce? And that's just an easy peasy thing. That works in probably 98% of the time. Also, The next question is, if it comes in a box, car, jar, can, or package, is are there more than a few ingredients? Generally speaking, fewer ingredients is always better than more ingredients, right? When you go to buy cabbage, you want it to be, sauerkraut, you want it to be, what are the ingredients?
Salt, water,
water,
cabbage.
But look in the grocery store and you'll see a lot of additional ingredients on that. And then the last one, is the last question is it organic? So that is sourcing for dummies. Now, I promise I've only got 3 minutes left to go, but I've spit a lot of information at you guys really fast. This is such a huge topic and I'm so enthusiastic I talk too much anyway, my wife would say. But if you're overwhelmed at all and you want to get more information on this, I would like to make you an offer. Can I make you an offer? I'm asking you permission. Okay, this offer might help you to kind of jumpstart, your wellness. So I talked to you a little bit about, what a health coach is, but the reason to work with a health coach, just as a flyover, is that really the weekly meetings are the key, because that's where you make fast progress, and that's where I made mine. That also provides a lot of agility and flexibility. A lot of time goes, between doctor appointments. You just waste time if something's not working and you wait a month. Week to week to week, oh, this isn't working, let's make a tweak, let's make an adjustment. It takes the overwhelm out of the process, so you don't have to think about every little detail, because there can be some details to it. And it's the best way to learn a new life skill. Most of our clients, by the end of the program that we work with them on, they say, I will never go back to eating the way that I used to. And they learn it's a new life skill. And what we tell people is that eating well is not about perfection. It's about knowing the way back. So if you decide to celebrate and go have like some giant piece of cheesecake or a nice barrel brewed beer down at the market, you know the way back because you've learned. You know the way back to health. And that really is, what it's all about, because we want to enjoy life and certain strategic indulgences. And then also, health coaching fills in that gap that the medical system doesn't do. So, because you guys have been so kind and patient, of course, Becky and I want to offer you a free online discovery session. This is a live session, no obligation, but we will do a 45-minute review on an analysis of a survey that you would fill out, a lifestyle survey. And from that, we'll give you some specific action items to implement. We'll put you in our Facebook group, and we'll provide 2 weeks of text and email support after that. So when we do that analysis, you'll get some good information at no charge. Now, I want to just emphasize that I promise, my wife wouldn't let me. She's head of the sales prevention department here at our company. She will not let me put you in a headlock and make it uncomfortable. If what you learn in that session is you can use and run with, we will cheer you on. We are passionate about this, and we want life change first. So that said, that session does have a value of $299, but for you, no charge. All we need in return is your email address. So there's a sign up, there's some forms and a sign up sheet over there. Give us your email address so that we can email you the link, and then we can schedule something and do that. So let's see. I think 2 last items. In 2 weeks, we're going to do one more talk. I'll try to be faster on toxins. Massive topic. I'll try to keep it shorter, but we live in a toxic world, and we've got to get those toxins out of our life. And secondly, I just want to thank Kathy and Robbie for hosting us here. Our heart beats with theirs in terms of changing the world and health. It's more than about just selling produce or selling coaching services, whatever. It really is about creating change in the world and having people be healthier so they can live their life and live their dreams and all that. So thank you very much.
We appreciate you all coming out and staying and listening. Like he mentioned, we will have a follow-up class in 2 weeks. I believe we'll have all those details and everything on Facebook, and so we'll be sure, if you guys stay connected, we'll be sure to let you know exactly when and all the details. But it's looking like 2 weeks from now. And so we appreciate you guys coming. Thank you both for your time and teaching us. Like you mentioned, we just really want for everyone in our community and everywhere really to be have access to this information and to be able to improve your health. So we fully believe in that, and we hope that if you have any questions, you just come up here and speak with them. They'll be happy to help you. And I want to mention too, we will be having a in 2 weeks, the Saturday before Mother's Day, we'll be having the class, but we're also going to do something for Mother's Day. We're going to have like a DIY edible bouquet making, which will be really fun. So if you have some moms that are hard to buy for, this would be something that would be really fun. So it'll have flowers, but also some elements in it that they could actually eat as well. So you guys stay tuned. We'll have that up too. And we'll hope to see you guys in a couple weeks. So thank you all for coming and enjoy your
Thanks, Kathy.
weekend.